6, a scandal involving Connecticut State Police and thousands of fake tickets now heating up.
And lawmakers are demanding answers. Governor Lamont says those who intentionally did this should be let go, including management.
Our chief political reporter Susan Raff is at State Police headquarters in Middletown with what all of this means.
There are big problems for the Connecticut State Police. It is possible that hundreds of troopers falsified thousands of traffic tickets. Those hired to uphold the law are now being investigated for breaking it. A recent audit found troopers falsified nearly 26,000 traffic tickets, and more than 32,000 were inaccurate. Ken Barone pushed for the audit after an internal investigation found 4 troopers had falsified tickets.
There's no evidence that these are real people.
Barone says this has raised concerns about skewing racial profiling data.
The unmatched records were more likely to be white drivers, identified as white individuals, and the records that should have been likely reported to the system and were not were more likely to be Hispanic motorists or motorists of some other race.
If people were not investigating this thoroughly, if they knew that they were purposeful mistakes, not mistakes, purposely misrepresenting what was going on, those people should go, and I think their management should take a look at themselves as well.
Lawmakers are holding a hearing next Thursday.
Losing the lack of trust of the public in a situation like this has dire consequences for our sense of public safety.
The investigation found troopers did this for their own personal benefit. Troopers who appear productive are often eligible for federally funded overtime.
It is yet another example of how easy it is to find this kinds of fraud or false statements or misconduct because of technology.
Some of these state troopers could face criminal charges. Forgery is a felony, but time is running out. There are statute of limitations, and in this case, it is 5 years. And some want to know why it's taking prosecutors so long to decide whether or not to bring charges. In Middletown, Susan Raff, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.